A black flight attendant was publicly degraded and called a racial slur by a first-class passenger who demanded she be fired on the spot, while 200 passengers watched in frozen silence. "Listen here, girl. I don't take orders from people like you, so get your supervisor before I have you removed from this plane." Catherine Morrison grabbed flight attendant Simone Harper's wrist and twisted it hard enough to leave marks, her diamond rings cutting into Simone's dark skin as she hissed, "Know your place." Simone pulled her hand back slowly, her face calm even as her wrist throbbed, and said nothing. But her eyes held something that made the businessman in 2B shift uncomfortably and reach for his phone. Catherine threw her head back and laughed, already pulling out her cell to call her lawyer husband, absolutely certain that her status, her money, and her skin color made her untouchable. What Catherine didn't know was that the supervisor she just demanded was sitting 3 rows behind her, and she'd been recording everything. Delta Flight 1547. Atlanta to Los Angeles. 30 minutes before takeoff. Simone Harper had been a flight attendant for Delta Airlines for 6 years. At 32, she'd served thousands of passengers, handled countless difficult situations, and maintained her professionalism through it all. Today would test every ounce of that training. She was working first class, her favorite assignment because the cabin was smaller, the service more personal, and most passengers were seasoned travelers who understood flight protocols. Catherine Morrison boarded with the entitled swagger of someone who'd never been told no. She was in her early 50s, blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, designer pantsuit, Louis Vuitton carry-on, and a permanent expression of disdain. She handed Simone her boarding pass without looking at her. "Seat 3A, Simone said warmly. "Right this way, ma'am. May I help you with your bag?" "I'm perfectly capable," Catherine snapped, jerking the bag away as if Simone had tried to steal it. Simone's smile never wavered. "Of course. Please let me know if you need anything once we're airborne." Catherine ignored her completely. The first sign of trouble came 15 minutes later when Simone approached with pre-departure beverages. "Would you care for water, orange juice, or champagne, ma'am?" Catherine didn't look up from her phone. "Champagne, in a proper glass, not plastic." "Of course, ma'am." Simone returned with champagne in a real glass flute, Delta's first-class service standard. Catherine took one sip and grimaced. "This is domestic champagne." "Yes, ma'am. We serve Shandon for our first-class service." "I don't drink domestic." Catherine shoved the glass back at Simone hard enough that champagne sloshed onto Simone's uniform. "Bring me something European, Veuve Clicquot at minimum." Simone felt the cold liquid seep through her blouse but kept her voice steady. "I apologize, ma'am, but Shandon is what we have available today. I can offer you water, juice, or one of our other beverages." "Are you telling me no?" Catherine's voice rose sharply. "Do you know who I am?" "I'm not telling you no, ma'am. I'm explaining what's available on this flight." "I didn't ask for explanations. I asked for proper champagne." Catherine's eyes finally met Simone's, and the contempt was unmistakable. "Is this really that difficult for you to understand, or should I use smaller words?" The cabin went quiet. Other passengers were watching now. Simone felt heat rise in her cheeks, not from embarrassment, but from anger she couldn't show. "Ma'am, I understand your preference. Unfortunately, we don't carry Veuve Clicquot on domestic flights. I'd be happy to." "Then this is unacceptable, completely unacceptable." Catherine pulled out her phone. "I'm calling my husband. He's an attorney, and he'll want to know that Delta is providing substandard service in first class." Simone took a slow breath. "That's certainly your right, ma'am. In the meantime, may I bring you a different beverage?" "You may bring me your supervisor." "Ma'am, we haven't taken off yet. The flight supervisor is currently—" "I don't care where she is. Get her now." The businessman in 2B spoke up quietly. "Ma'am, The flight attendant is just doing her job. Catherine whipped around. Was I speaking to you? No, then mind your business. He raised his hands and looked away, but Simone saw him slide his phone from his pocket. But this was only the beginning. Lead flight attendant Renee Washington appeared, summoned by Simone's discreet call button press. Renee was 53, 28 years with Delta, and she'd seen every type of passenger imaginable. Good afternoon, I'm Renee Washington, the lead flight attendant. How can I help you today? Catherine stood, and Simone noticed she was a good 3 inches taller than Renee. Finally, someone in charge. I need this, she gestured dismissively at Simone. Person removed from my section of the plane. Renee's expression didn't change. May I ask why, ma'am? She's incompetent. She doesn't understand basic service standards, and frankly, her attitude is unacceptable. I see, and what specifically happened? I asked for proper champagne, European champagne, and she refused to provide it. Then she spilled champagne on herself and tried to make it seem like my fault. This is first class. I paid $4,000 for this seat. I expect professional service, not. Catherine looked Simone up and down with undisguised disgust. Whatever this is. Simone stood perfectly still, hands clasped in front of her, face neutral. Years of training kept her expression calm, but inside she was screaming. Renee's voice remained professional. Ma'am, I apologize for any frustration. Our flight attendant was correct that we don't stock View Clickwad on this route. However, I'd be happy to ensure you receive excellent service for the remainder of the flight. Would you prefer that Simone continue serving your row, or would you like me to? I want her fired. The word hung in the air. Several passengers gasped audibly. Excuse me, Renee said. You heard me. I want her fired. Immediately. And I want written confirmation from Delta that she's been terminated before this plane lands in Los Angeles. Ma'am, I don't have the authority to terminate employees. Then get someone who does. Catherine pulled out her phone again. My husband is Bradley Morrison. He's a partner at Morrison, Chen and Associates. I'm sure you've heard of them. They handle airline litigation. One call from me and Delta will be named in a lawsuit for discrimination and hostile service. Simone's hands tightened slightly, but she said nothing. Renee kept her voice level. Ma'am, I understand you're upset. However, Simone is an exemplary employee who followed proper protocol. I'm not going to discipline her for doing her job correctly. Catherine's face flushed red. Are you refusing a first-class passenger's reasonable request? I'm declining an unreasonable demand to terminate a flight attendant who has done nothing wrong. Nothing wrong. Catherine's voice hit a pitch that made several passengers wince. She was rude, she was incompetent, and frankly, I don't appreciate being served by someone who clearly doesn't meet Delta's standards. And what standards are those, ma'am? Renee's voice had an edge now. Professional standards, appearance standards. I'm paying for a premium experience and I expect my flight attendants to look appropriate. The implication was clear. Simone was in full Delta uniform, navy blue dress pressed and perfect, hair in a neat bun, minimal makeup, name tag polished. There was nothing unprofessional about her appearance. Nothing except the color of her skin. The businessman in 2B spoke again, louder this time. Ma'am, that's inappropriate. Catherine rounded on him. I said mind your business. It stopped being not my business when you started making racist comments. Racist? Catherine's voice was shrill now. How dare you? I'm not racist. I have black friends. I donate to charities I voted for. Ma'am, Renee interrupted firmly, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice and return to your seat. We're about to begin our safety demonstration. I'm not sitting down until someone addresses this situation properly. Then I'll need to contact the captain and report a disruptive passenger. Catherine's eyes went wide. Disruptive? I'm the victim here. This is outrageous. She turned to the other first-class passengers, appealing to them. Can you believe this? I make one reasonable request and suddenly I'm the problem. No one responded. Most looked away, uncomfortable. But the businessman in 2B met her eyes. Your request wasn't reasonable, ma'am, and your behavior is embarrassing. Catherine's face went from red to purple. You know what? Fine, fine, I'll sit down, but when we land, I'm filing formal complaints against all of you. She jabbed a finger at Simone. Especially you. I'm going to make sure you never work for Delta again, or any airline. You understand me, girl? The word girl came out like a slap. Simone's jaw tightened, but she still said nothing. Catherine sat down heavily, pulled out her phone, and started typing furiously. Renee touched Simone's arm gently. Step into the galley with me. In the relative privacy of the galley, Renee spoke quietly. Are you okay? I'm fine, Simone said, but her voice shook slightly. You don't have to be fine. What she said was completely out of line. I know, but I can handle it. I'm documenting everything, and I'm calling this in to corporate before we even take off. Renee, don't. Simone, this isn't about you being sensitive. This is about a passenger using racial language and making threats. That's a federal aviation regulation violation. I'm required to report it. Simone nodded slowly. Okay. I can have her removed from the flight right now if you want. No, don't. I don't want to give her any ammunition to say I couldn't handle the job. Renee studied her face. You've been doing this long enough to know that you don't have to tolerate abuse. I know, but I also know how this looks. Black flight attendant gets white passenger removed. She'll make it a whole thing. Lawsuit, media, everything. I want to do my job and get through this flight. You're sure? I'm sure. Renee squeezed her shoulder. Okay, but I'm staying close. And Simone? Yeah. You're one of the best flight attendants I've ever worked with. Don't let her make you doubt that. Simone managed a small smile. Thanks, Renee. What she didn't know was who was watching. The flight took off on time, but the tension in first class was thick enough to cut. Catherine continued making demands every 10 minutes. Her blanket wasn't soft enough. Her meal was served too cold. Her coffee was too hot. Each request came with a barb, a comment, a subtle and sometimes not so subtle dig at Simone. Can you manage to get this right, or should I ask someone more competent? I'm sure this is difficult for you to understand, but in first class, we expect quality. Perhaps you're better suited for the back of the plane. Simone handled each interaction with perfect professionalism. She never raised her voice, never showed frustration, never gave Catherine any legitimate complaint. But inside she was exhausted. By hour 2 of the 5-hour flight, Simone stepped into the rear galley to catch her breath. Her colleague Marcus Chen, working economy, found her there. Heard you got a rough one up front, he said sympathetically. You could say that. Want me to accidentally spill something on her? He grinned. Despite everything, Simone laughed. Tempting, but no. Renee told me what happened. That's messed up, Simone. You want me to take over first class for a bit? No, I've got it, but thanks, Marcus. You sure? Because you look like you're about 2 seconds from losing it. I'm not going to lose it. That's what she wants. She wants me to snap to give her something to use against me. She's already using stuff against you that doesn't exist. I know, but I'm not giving her anything real. Marcus shook his head admiringly. You're stronger than me. I'd have accidentally put her bag in the wrong luggage compartment by now. Simone smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Can I ask you something? Shoot. How many years have you been doing this? 8. Have you ever had a passenger call you a racial slur? Marcus's smile faded. Yeah, twice. Both times I had them removed from the flight. And what happened after? One wrote a complaint letter, Nothing came of it. The other tried to sue Delta, also nothing. Did you ever regret having them removed? Marcus looked at her carefully. No, because they crossed a line, and you don't get to cross that line without consequences. He paused. Why did she call you something? She called me girl. The way people used to say it, you know what I mean. Marcus's face darkened. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and that's enough to have her removed right now. Federal regs, Simone, you don't have to take that. I know, but I'm choosing to finish this flight to prove I can. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. Maybe not to anyone else, but I have to prove it to myself. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Okay, but if she crosses the line again, and I mean any line, you call me or Renee immediately. Promise. Promise. But here's the part that changed everything. 3 hours into the flight, Catherine pressed her call button for what felt like the 100th time. Simone approached with the same professional smile. Yes, ma'am. I need to speak to the captain. The captain is currently flying the aircraft, ma'am. Is there something I can help you with? No, you can't help me. That's been abundantly clear this entire flight. I need to speak to someone competent, someone in charge, someone who can actually address my concerns. Ma'am, I'd be happy to get lead flight attendant Washington. I already spoke to her. She was just as useless as you. I want the captain. Simone kept her voice calm. Ma'am, I'm not able to disturb the captain during flight unless there's an emergency. This is an emergency. The service on this flight has been absolutely unacceptable. I've been ignored, disrespected, and treated like I don't matter. Several passengers were watching now, some with phones out. The businessman in 2B had been recording on and off for the past hour. Simone had noticed. Ma'am, I understand you're frustrated. You understand nothing. Catherine stood up, invading Simone's space. Do you have any idea who you're dealing with? My husband is one of the top aviation attorneys in the country. One call from him and your entire career is over. Over. Do you understand me? Ma'am, I need you to step back and lower your voice. Don't you dare tell me what to do. Catherine's voice had reached a screech. You think you can talk to me like that? You think you have any authority over me? She grabbed Simone's wrist, the same one she'd grabbed during boarding, and twisted. Hard. Simone gasped but didn't pull away. Ma'am, you're hurting me. Oh, I'm hurting. Catherine laughed bitterly. You have no idea what hurt is. When my husband is done with you, when you're unemployed and unemployable, then you'll know what hurt feels like. She leaned in close, her breath hot on Simone's face, and hissed, Know your place, girl. The cabin went dead silent. Catherine released Simone's wrist and sat down with a satisfied smirk, clearly confident she'd won. Simone stood there, wrist throbbing, face burning with humiliation. And then a voice came from 3 rows back. That's enough. Everyone turned. A black woman in her mid-40s stood up from seat 6C. She was elegantly dressed in a business suit, her natural hair in beautiful locks, and she had an air of authority that made everyone pay attention. Excuse me, Catherine said, her smirk faltering. The woman stepped into the aisle and walked forward slowly, deliberately. I said that's enough. This flight attendant has been nothing but professional despite your continuous harassment. And what you just did, grabbing her, threatening her, using racially coded language, that's assault. It's also a federal offense. Catherine's face went pale, then red. Who the hell are you? The woman reached into her jacket and pulled out a badge. Federal Air Marshal credentials. I'm Special Agent Monique Taylor, Federal Air Marshal Service. And ma'am, you're under arrest. The cabin erupted in gasps and murmurs. Catherine's mouth fell open. Arrested for what? Assault of a flight crew member. Interference with flight crew duties. Use of threatening language. And based on the recording I've made of this entire interaction, we'll probably add a hate crime enhancement. Hate crime, I didn't, this is ridiculous. Catherine looked around wildly for support. This is a setup, she barely touched me. She grabbed the flight attendant's wrist hard enough to leave marks. That's assault. The rest of it is just icing on the cake. Agent Taylor looked at Simone. Are you all right? Simone nodded, still processing what was happening. I'll need to see your wrist. Simone held out her arm. Clear red marks circled her wrist, already beginning to bruise. Agent Taylor took photos with her phone, her face grim. Ma'am, she said to Catherine, I'm going to need you to return to your seat. You'll be detained by FBI and local law enforcement when we land. This is insane. I haven't done anything wrong. You violated 49 U.S. Code Section 46504, interference with flight crew members. That's a felony, ma'am. Up to 20 years in prison. Catherine's face went white. 20 years for what? Asking for decent service. For assaulting a flight attendant and threatening her job based on racial animus. Agent Taylor's voice was steel. Now sit down, ma'am. Immediately. I want to speak to my attorney. You can do that when we land. Until then, you will sit quietly in your seat, you will not address the flight crew, and you will not cause any further disturbance. If you do, I will physically restrain you. Is that clear? Catherine sat down heavily, all the fight seemingly drained from her. But her eyes promised murder. Agent Taylor turned to Simone. I need you to write down everything that happened from the moment she boarded. Times, quotes, witnesses, everything. Yes, ma'am. And Simone, Agent Taylor's voice softened. You did everything right, everything. Don't let anyone tell you different. Simone felt tears prick her eyes but blinked them back. Thank you. Would you have stayed quiet in her place? For the remaining 2 hours of the flight, Catherine sat in rigid silence. Agent Taylor returned to her seat, but kept a clear line of sight to Catherine at all times. Simone worked through the rest of first-class service on autopilot, her mind still reeling. During a quiet moment in the galley, Renee pulled her aside. Are you okay, really? I think so, I'm just processing. That woman was out of line from the beginning. I should have removed her earlier. It's not your fault, Renee. I know, but I hate that you had to go through that. At least there was a witness, an air marshal of all people. A witness who's going to make sure Catherine Morrison faces real consequences. Simone nodded, but something was nagging at her. Renee, do you think this is really over? What do you mean? She said her husband is a big-shot lawyer. What if he finds a way to spin this? What if they come after me anyway? Renee shook her head firmly. They can't. Agent Taylor has everything documented, plus that businessman in 2B. He's been recording too. I talked to him during the meal service. He's a retired federal judge. He said he'd testify if needed. A federal judge? Yep, Catherine Morrison picked the wrong flight to act a fool on. Despite everything, Simone smiled slightly. But the smile faded quickly. Because she knew, from years of being a black woman in America, that having evidence and witnesses didn't always mean justice would be served. If only she knew what would happen next. When the plane touched down at Lax, the captain's voice came over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Los Angeles. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened. We have law enforcement boarding the aircraft for official business. This will only take a few minutes. Thank you for your patience. Murmurs rippled through the cabin. Catherine sat very still, her face expressionless. 2 FBI agents and 3 airport police officers boarded. Agent Taylor met them at the front of the plane, showed her credentials, and briefed them quickly. Then they approached Catherine's seat. Ma'am, I'm Agent David Chen with the FBI. Please stand and gather your belongings. This is a mistake, Catherine said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. When my husband hears about this. Your husband has already been notified, ma'am. He's meeting you at the federal building." They escorted her off the plane. As she passed Simone, Catherine hissed, "This isn't over." Agent Taylor stepped between them. "Actually, ma'am, it is. Keep walking." After Catherine was removed, the rest of the passengers deplaned. Many stopped to speak to Simone. "You handled that with such grace. I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." That woman was completely out of line. The retired federal judge, Judge Raymond Martinez, handed Simone his card. "If you need a witness for any proceedings, legal or otherwise, you call me. What I saw today was disgraceful, and I want to make sure that woman faces appropriate consequences." "Thank you, Your Honor," Simone managed. When the plane was finally empty, Simone sat down in seat 1A and let herself breathe. Renee sat beside her. "You did it, you got through it." "Barely." "More than barely. You were professional, dignified, and strong. I'm proud of you." Simone's phone buzzed. A text from her supervisor at Delta, "Call me ASAP." Her stomach dropped. "Oh God, what if they're calling to fire me?" "They're not going to fire you." "How do you know?" "Because you didn't do anything wrong, and because I sent a detailed report to corporate before we even took off. You're covered, Simone." Simone called her supervisor anyway. Patricia Ross, Delta's Southeast Regional Manager, answered immediately. "Simone, are you all right?" "Yes, ma'am. I heard what happened, all of it. I'm so sorry you had to experience that." "Thank you, ma'am. Listen, we're conducting a full investigation, but I want you to know that you did everything by the book. Everything. You should be proud of how you handled that situation." "Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate that. Take the rest of the week off. Paid. And we're providing access to counseling services if you need them." "I don't need time off." "Yes, you do. After what you went through, you need time to process. This is non-negotiable." "Yes, ma'am." "And Simone, one more thing." "Yes." "Catherine Morrison's husband called me personally. He wanted me to fire you and issue a public apology." Simone's heart sank, and I told him that his wife committed multiple federal crimes on one of our aircraft, that we have extensive documentation of her behavior, and that if he continues to harass Delta employees, we'll pursue our own civil action against them, both for defamation and attempted intimidation. Simone couldn't speak for a moment. You stood up for me." "Of course I did. You're our employee. You did your job perfectly. No one gets to threaten my people, not even fancy lawyers." After the call ended, Simone sat in stunned silence. "Good news?" Renee asked. "Better than good news. My supervisor told Catherine's husband to back off." "As she should. You're not alone in this, Simone. Delta has your back. The Air Marshal has your back. Judge Martinez has your back. You have so many people supporting you." "I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop." "What do you mean?" "I mean, this feels too easy, too clean. Women like Catherine Morrison don't just go quietly. They have money, connections, power. What if she finds a way to come after me anyway?" Renee stood and offered her hand to pull Simone up. "Then we deal with it, together. But right now, let's get you home." And just when things seemed calm, the truth would shake everything. 3 days later, Simone's phone started blowing up at 6 a.m. Text calls, social media notifications. She grabbed her phone groggily and saw messages from friends, family, and coworkers, all saying the same thing. "Have you seen the video? You're viral. Everyone's talking about what happened." Simone's stomach dropped. She opened Twitter and saw it immediately. The businessman from 2B, who she'd learned was Judge Raymond Martinez, had posted his recording. Not just the final confrontation with the air marshal, but everything. Every interaction, every insult, every racially charged comment. The video had been posted 2 days ago, and already had 15 million views. The caption read, "This is what black service workers face every day. This Delta flight attendant showed incredible professionalism in the face of blatant racism. We see you, Simone Harper, and we stand with you. Justice for Simone Delta flight attendant." The comments were overwhelming. Thousands of people supporting her. Other flight attendants sharing similar stories. Celebrities retweeting. Civil rights organizations offering legal support. But there were also negative comments. People defending Catherine. People saying Simone must have done something to provoke her. People claiming the whole thing was staged. Simone's hands shook as she scrolled through it all. Her phone rang. Patricia Ross. "Simone, have you seen the video? I just woke up to it." "Okay, listen carefully. Do not make any public statements. Do not respond to any media requests. Delta's legal and PR teams are handling this." What does that mean? It means we're issuing a statement supporting you and condemning Catherine Morrison's behavior. We're also permanently banning her from Delta flights. You're banning her? Yes, her behavior violated our passenger conduct policy. She's not welcome on our aircraft. But what about her husband, the threats? Patricia's voice turned cold. Bradley Morrison attempted to intimidate us into firing you and covering this up. That was a mistake. We're not only standing by you, we're cooperating fully with the FBI's investigation into his wife's assault charges. This is really happening. Yes, and Simone, you're not alone. You have Delta behind you. You have millions of people supporting you, and you have the truth on your side. After hanging up, Simone spent the next hour reading comments on the video. Many made her cry. "My mother was a flight attendant in the 1970s. She faced this every single day and had no one standing up for her. Thank you for your grace and dignity. I'm a black teacher and I've been called girl the same way. The pain in her eyes is something I recognize. Stay strong, sister." This flight attendant is a queen. The way she maintained her composure is incredible. But one comment stopped her cold. It was from Catherine Morrison's daughter. "I'm Catherine Morrison's daughter. I'm watching this video in horror because this is exactly how my mother treats service workers, especially black women. I'm so sorry. You didn't deserve this. No one does." The comment had over 100,000 likes. Simone stared at it for a long time. Even Catherine's own daughter had disavowed her behavior. Be honest, what would you have done? 2 weeks later, Simone was called to testify at Catherine Morrison's federal hearing. She'd been dreading this day. Dreading seeing Catherine again. Dreading having to relive everything. But when she walked into the federal courthouse in Los Angeles, she wasn't alone. Renee was there. Marcus was there. Judge Martinez was there. Agent Taylor was there. And sitting in the gallery were dozens of other flight attendants, black women, Latina women, Asian women, all wearing their uniforms in solidarity. Catherine sat at the defense table with her high-powered legal team, looking small and diminished. Her husband wasn't there. Simone learned later that Bradley Morrison had quietly filed for divorce the week the video went viral. The federal prosecutor, Assistant U.S. Attorney Lisa Tran, called Simone to the stand. She walked her through the entire flight. Every interaction. Every insult. Every threat. Catherine's lawyer tried to make Simone seem oversensitive, dramatic, opportunistic. "Isn't it true, Ms. Harper, that you've received significant media attention from this incident?" "Yes." "And isn't it true that you're now being represented by a publicist?" "Delta's PR team has been helping me handle media requests." "Yes." "So you've benefited from this situation?" "I've benefited from people supporting me after I was assaulted. I wouldn't call that a benefit from the situation itself." Ms. Harper, isn't it possible you misinterpreted Mrs. Morrison's comments? Simone looked the lawyer dead in the eye. No, it's not possible. She grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise. She called me girl the way people used to call black women girl to diminish them. She threatened my job repeatedly. There's nothing to misinterpret. But you have no evidence of racial animus. I have a video of her saying I don't meet Delta's standards despite being in full uniform. I have her repeatedly calling me incompetent for following company policy. I have her saying I should be in the back of the plane where I belong. If that's not racial animus, I don't know what is. Judge Martinez was called next. His testimony was devastating to Catherine's defense. I've been a federal judge for 23 years. I've seen a lot of behavior in courtrooms and in life. What I witnessed on that flight was textbook racial harassment. Mrs. Morrison's language, her tone, her physical aggression. It was all designed to demean and intimidate a black woman who was simply doing her job. Agent Taylor's testimony sealed Catherine's fate. As a federal air marshal, I'm trained to identify threats to flight safety. Mrs. Morrison was a threat from the moment she started escalating, but I held back intervention hoping she'd calm down. She didn't. Instead, she committed assault. That gave me no choice but to intervene and make an arrest. When all testimony was completed, the federal magistrate didn't even take a recess. Based on the evidence presented, I find that Catherine Morrison did willfully assault a flight crew member, did interfere with flight crew duties, and did use threatening language with racial overtones. She is hereby ordered to serve 6 months in federal prison, followed by 2 years of supervised release, 200 hours of community service, and mandatory completion of racial sensitivity training. The courtroom erupted. Catherine's lawyers immediately filed for appeal, but the judge denied bail pending appeal. Catherine would begin serving her sentence immediately. As federal marshals led Catherine away, she looked at Simone one last time. There was no smirk now, no arrogance, just the hollow look of someone who'd finally faced consequences. The story dominated news cycles for weeks. Simone was interviewed by Good Morning America, The View, and countless news outlets. She always gave the same message. This isn't just about me. This is about every service worker who faces abuse and discrimination every day. This is about black women who are expected to be perfect, to stay silent, to absorb mistreatment without complaint. I hope my story reminds people that we're human, we deserve respect, and we have the right to expect our employers and the legal system to protect us. Delta announced sweeping policy changes. Zero tolerance for passenger harassment of crew members. Immediate removal and lifetime bans for passengers who assault crew. Enhanced support and legal protection for employees facing discrimination. New training programs on recognizing and addressing racial harassment. Other airlines followed suit. The Association of Flight Attendants created the Simone Harper Award for flight attendants who demonstrate exceptional professionalism in difficult situations. Simone received thousands of letters from flight attendants, service workers, and everyday people sharing their own stories. She read every single one. Many made her cry. Some made her angry all over again. All of them reminded her why speaking up had mattered. 6 months after the incident, Simone was promoted to lead flight attendant. A year later, she was recruited to Delta's corporate office to help develop anti-discrimination training programs. She said yes, because she'd learned something important through all of this. Her pain had purpose. Her silence, when she chose to maintain professional dignity, hadn't been weakness. It had been strategy. And when the right moment came, when she had witnesses and documentation and truth on her side, her voice had been powerful enough to create real change. Catherine Morrison served her 6 months and was released. She never flew Delta again. She never publicly apologized beyond what the court ordered. But her daughter, the one who'd left the comment, reached out to Simone privately. They met for coffee. "I wanted to apologize for my mother," the daughter said, "and to thank you. Thank me for not backing down, for showing me that what I grew up seeing, how my mother treats service workers, especially black women, wasn't normal, wasn't okay. You helped me see clearly." Simone reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "That took courage. Thank you for reaching out. I should have said something that day. I was on the flight. I was in economy, but I could hear everything. I should have stood up. You're standing up now. That's what matters." 2 years after the incident, Simone was invited to speak at a flight attendant conference in Atlanta. She stood before 2,000 flight attendants from across the country. "When I got on that flight to Los Angeles, I had no idea what was about to happen. I had no idea I'd be tested in ways I'd never been tested before. And I had no idea that the hardest day of my career would become the most important day of my life." She paused, looking out at the sea of faces. Black, white, Latina, Asian men, women, all unified in shared experience. "Catherine Morrison assaulted me. She degraded me. She tried to destroy my career. But she didn't win. You know why? Because I refused to give her what she wanted. She wanted me to lose my temper, to be the angry black woman she expected, to give her an excuse to say, 'See, I was right about her.' But I didn't. I stayed professional. I documented everything. I trusted that the truth would matter, and it did. My grandmother was a maid in the 1960s. She faced abuse like this every single day. No witnesses, no video, no protection. She just had to take it, smile, and say, 'Yes, ma'am.' My mother was a nurse in the 1980s. She faced discrimination too, but she had slightly more protection, slightly more recourse. Things were getting better, but slowly. Now it's my turn, and I have witnesses, I have video, I have laws that protect me, I have an employer that stood by me, I have a justice system that this time worked. Not every story ends this way. I know that. Too many black women face discrimination and never get justice, never get their day in court, never get vindication. So I'm not standing here to say the system always works. It doesn't. But I am standing here to say, don't be silent. Document everything. Find your witnesses. Know your rights. And when the time comes to speak up, speak clearly, speak truthfully, speak powerfully. Catherine Morrison thought she could treat me however she wanted because she had money and connections and white privilege. She was wrong. Because I had something more powerful than all of that. I had dignity, I had truth, I had documentation, and I had people willing to stand with me. That combination is unbeatable." Simone's voice softened. "To every flight attendant in this room who's faced abuse, who's been called names, grabbed, threatened, disrespected, I see you. I believe you. And I'm telling you, you don't have to accept it. You deserve better. We all do. Our silence is not weakness. Our professionalism is not submission. Our grace under pressure is not surrender. It's strategy. Because when the moment comes, and it will come, when we have the chance to speak truth to power, we want to speak from a position of unimpeachable integrity." Catherine Morrison learned that lesson the hard way. Let her story be a warning to anyone who thinks service workers are less than human, who thinks black women will stay silent, who thinks they can abuse people without consequences. We're done staying silent. We're done accepting less than respect. And we're done letting people like Catherine Morrison win. The room erupted in a standing ovation that lasted 5 minutes. After the speech, Simone was surrounded by flight attendants wanting to share their stories, to thank her, to hug her. One older black woman, at least 70, pushed through the crowd. "Baby, I was a flight attendant in 1968. First black woman hired by my airline. I faced hell every single day. I wish I'd had the courage to do what you did. Simone took both her hands. You had courage, you survived. You paved the way for women like me. I'm standing on your shoulders. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, baby. Thank you for making it mean something. Simone Harper stood in her office at Delta's Atlanta headquarters. She was now director of crew support and passenger relations, a position created specifically for her. Her job was to ensure no Delta employee ever faced what she'd faced without support, protection, and justice. On her wall hung a framed photo from that flight. Not of Catherine Morrison, but of the moment after Catherine was removed from the plane. Simone standing in the aisle, surrounded by the other first-class passengers, all of them applauding. Judge Martinez was in the photo, smiling. So was the businessman in 3C who'd spoken up. So were a dozen other passengers who'd witnessed everything. People who'd seen injustice and decided not to look away. Simone's assistant knocked. Your 2 p.m. is here. Send them in. A young black woman in a Delta flight attendant uniform entered nervously. Ms. Harper, I'm Jasmine Edwards. I'm so sorry to bother you, but I need help. Sit down, Jasmine. Tell me what happened. And as Jasmine told her story, another passenger, another incident, another moment of discrimination, Simone listened with the full attention of someone who understood every word. When Jasmine finished, tears streaming down her face, she said, I don't know what to do. I don't want to cause trouble. I just want to do my job. Simone reached across the desk and took her hand. Jasmine, you're not causing trouble. The passenger who harassed you caused trouble, and here's what we're going to do. As Simone walked Jasmine through the reporting process, the documentation requirements, the support systems available, she felt a deep sense of purpose. Her pain had become protection for others. Her story had become a shield for those who came after. And Catherine Morrison, who tried to destroy her, had inadvertently helped her build something beautiful. A system where black women didn't have to fight alone. Where dignity was defended. Where justice was possible. It wasn't perfect. There were still Catherines out there. Still discrimination. Still battles to fight. But now there were also witnesses. Documentation. Support. And women like Simone Harper, who turned their pain into power and their silence into strength. That night, Simone flew to Los Angeles for a work meeting. Delta Flight 1547. The same flight number from 5 years ago. She sat in first class, as a passenger this time, not crew. The flight attendant working her section was a young Latina woman named Rosa. She was professional, warm, competent. And when a passenger in 4C started getting demanding and rude, Rosa handled it perfectly. But Simone watched the passenger carefully. And when his demands started crossing into disrespect, Simone didn't hesitate. She pressed her call button. Rosa appeared. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to say you're doing an excellent job, and that passenger in 4C is out of line. If he continues, I want you to know you have my full support as a witness. Rosa's eyes widened as she recognized Simone. Ms. Harper. Yes, and Rosa, don't ever let anyone make you feel small. You belong here. You deserve respect. And if you don't get it, you document it and you report it. Understood? Rosa's eyes filled with tears. Yes, ma'am, thank you. The passenger in 4C must have overheard, because he immediately became polite and stopped making demands. Simone smiled, because that's what the story of Catherine Morrison had taught the world. There are always witnesses. There are always consequences. And black women don't stay silent anymore.